Okay, so I have to say it's pretty amazing to be able to follow Jack just now and to be in this wonderfully yummy space that you guys have all created. Also, it's an honor to follow Tristan because I was actually in the room when he brought Thich Nhat Hanh to Google many years ago, and it feels like we're still all in this together, so that's just kind of amazing. Where I'll start is with the simple stuff, which is basically, so I run a research and design lab inside of Google that shapes how future technologies like AI are being built. And people often ask me why and how I started the lab, and so I'm going to share the Google part, of course, but because this is wisdom and Soren asked me to come here and share with our Sangha, I'll share the Danielle part too. So I'll begin with some work that we just wrapped up. So the mental health crisis for young people has been weighing really, really heavy on all of our hearts. So I started this project called Listening by Feeling, and it was a research collaboration between artists and young people that were struggling with stressful feelings, loneliness, and anxiety. And I'll just read the first page of this book that we made. So there isn't anyone you couldn't learn to love once you've heard their story. This is from Mr. Rogers, so we agree. The Empathy Lab wants to understand the inner worlds of people who struggle with stressful feelings and their overall sense of well-being. So we started by listening to how it feels, that thing, that feeling. And so the research instruction was actually take a minute to remember a moment where you've had a stressful feeling or challenge this week, and then take us inside of it with you. How did it feel? Show us what it looks like. What does it smell like? What does it taste like? We really want to be in it with you too. Because anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that's mentionable can be more manageable. When we see our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, less scary, and the people that we trust with those moments can help us know that we're not alone. Because it's messy being human, especially when it comes to stressful feelings, and it has to be okay to not be okay. So that's kind of what we started to do with this project. And what we found was we had people give us these incredibly vulnerable answers, and then they drew these amazing pictures. And so we had artists render those pictures, and I'll just read a few things out that came from it. So this was about this woman that felt that she was gasping for air in an ocean current of fear. It was like a weight on this man's back who was trying his hardest to lift it up and walk. This other woman imagined it as her reflection talking back at her. And then another was just a giant crying face that spilled this face. And then my favorite was actually that it was a red, lumpy feeling of nothingness. So this work, all of this is why the lab exists. When you make things for people, you have to go there with them. I've personally always loved listening to people's feelings and stories as they share their inner lives, and the things we don't say, the things we carry in the pockets of ourselves that go unseen unless we share it. How we make meaning, how our experiences draw maps in our bodies and in our hearts. I've always really just wanted to understand why we are the way we are and how it kind of all fits together. My earliest memory is actually laying underneath our family dining room table, and I just laid there with my eyes closed, kind of holding my breath. And my mom came in and was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I want to see what happens after." So I'm this little tripper. Really, I'm a blend of a neurosurgeon who operates to the Moody Blues and an artist turned therapist, seemingly kind of opposite worlds. So I've always felt this need to weave their threads of art and science and mystery together just to make sense of the world and really to find a way to feel whole myself. And then the technology piece comes in from my brother, this epic creative genius. He had the sun for a heart and a galaxy full of stars for a mind, and he poured out love and brilliance and insanely inventive ideas and hilariousness. One of my most precious memories of us is when we were both home for college, and we couldn't sleep, and at 2 a.m. we both kind of came out of our rooms and sat on the couch and watched this amazing space dork film called Sunshine. And we watched it, and we talked about black holes and reincarnation, and then when it was over, we just went to bed. We naturally called the thing that connected all of that kind of the great math in the sky. It's been 10 years since he died, and I miss him so much. So honestly, he's the real reason that this lab exists, because it's all kind of a conversation with him. So the lab is a space where I've made room for heart and soul and technology, along with, of course, all of the deep science and rigor. So from the beginning, 3 principles have really grounded the lab's research, design, and the films that we make. First is my greatest hero, Ram Dass, who said, treat everyone you meet as if they're God in drag. And I love that, because when you translate that in practice to what we do, what it means is listen well when I'm in presence with people out in the world, find the truth. Second is a concept from the Jewish tradition, Tikkun Olam, which I found actually in an interview by Krista Tippett with Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen. And she says, repair the world that you can see and touch. And in practice, again, that translates to design is this process of deep care that serves the spark that lives in everyone and everything. And then everything is better with Zappa. So without a few deviations from the norm, progress is never possible. So you can probably tell already that we have a really different design lens on our relationship with technology. So that's kind of the spiritual grounding of the lab. But the practical reason for the lab was that 4 to 5 years ago, I kept seeing similar things showing up across all my research studies and design explorations. Something was afoot, and I got really curious, and so I always take that to research. And what I was noticing in sort of significant as well as subtle ways was how much was changing in the way we live with technology and how it affects us. And I wanted to pay really close attention because this stuff really matters. So for instance, average person opens their phone 70 times a day, 2,600 touches a day. For most of us that are heavier users, it's more like 10,000. What that means is that over a course of a year, your thumb is going from Big Sur to Esalen, which is just a lot of travel. But it's not really about the density of the interaction, that's kind of its own thing. But for me, what I really pay attention to is the sensitivity of that interaction. It's so intimate, like Tristan was talking about. First thing in the morning, last thing at night, when we're bored, when we're busy, when we're by ourselves, when we're with a bunch of people. The whole emotional spectrum as we work and love and try and learn and make mistakes and change our minds and hope and freak out, basically when we human. And our devices aren't attuned to those things. And that's just so radically insufficient for the way we live with all of this intelligence now. And another factor is this whole kind of speaking and listening to things thing where we're talking all this stuff. When we do that, like 150,000 years of human hardwiring kicks in, because language is the defining quality of our species. So when it shows up, so do all of our feelings and projections. So it doesn't matter that Siri doesn't feel you. You're upset when she does not understand you. It feels like a bad relationship. You guys have a thing. But we can't help. It just shows us we can't help but show up with all of our human emotions, even though we rationally know, like, this is an inert thing. So really what this means, I love it. Circus. Really what this means is that this clearly isn't about designing for users. That's just a fraction of who we are. That's just behavior. This isn't just about solving for cognitive and functional needs anymore. This is really about the whole human, feelings and all the invisible things. So really what something does is almost less important than how it feels. And so we had the Gottmans here yesterday, which was amazing because they already talked about their magic ratio, the 5-to-1 ratio. But what I did was a research study where I looked at 3 different types of assistive presences. One was something that was like kind of knew it all and had all the information. One was that it was just neutral. And the other was something that didn't know as much or couldn't do as much, but was really lovely to be around. And what we saw is that the lovely one hit the magic ratio. So people actually prefer something that feels good rather than one that does more, which is kind of mind-blowing. Also, if you look at Google Home, it's a voice device. But people communicate with it in so many more ways than voice. Like they touch it, they make eye contact with it to make sure that they're being understood. There was this one woman who had a daughter, and the same gesture that she would do to her daughter when she wanted to make sure she understood her, she would do that to the home. She'd go. And so, we can't help it. Basically, like human's gonna human. And then I tried a little experiment too in this kind of relational space where I basically said, I know you know that this thing can't do everything, but like go ahead and treat it like a magic genie. Like try everything. Like ask it to do everything. Ask it to do things with you. Whatever the thing is. And people had fun. They asked it all kinds of crazy things. We had families dancing to Stevie Wonder. We had people trying to build time machines, and it did more than half of what they asked, which was kind of the surprise. It could do so much more than they even thought. So they discovered all this new stuff. But the real point is it was all an adventure. It brought up their curious and fun selves. So the point is it's not AI isn't about trying to make it like humans. It's about tapping the deepest parts of ourselves and our experience of our own humanity, what makes us human. Because really, tech problems aren't just tech problems. They're now human problems. So to be deserving of this intimacy in our lives, technology needs to understand us better, to go beyond the tasks and the doing of our lives, but to feel harmonious, to have good boundaries, to support our higher flourishing and our deeper interconnection. And that's totally possible. But to do that, we can't use the same design process that we've used for like 10 to 20 years. It just doesn't work anymore because it isn't about designing product. It's about designing presence. How something feels is as important as what it does. How something is with you. It can't be transactional. It must be relational. It's not just about engagement. It's about care and connection. It's not just analytics and machine learning. It's about aligned values and trust and really growing into our edge. It's not just IQ and knowledge. It's EQ and wisdom. And it's not just fast and full of invention. It's actually slow and full of what we in this room know is all about intention. So we call this move beyond design thinking design feeling, where we're not engineering the vulnerability out, we're letting it in. So here are a few ways that we do that. I am lucky enough to have a brilliant and very unconventional mix of advisors for the lab. We have Brene Brown helping us with courage, Frans de Waal, who is helping us with the early biological origins of empathy and nonverbal communication, Emily Nagoski and the juice of human relating. Yes, that means sexuality, but it's all about human dynamics. Dacher Keltner and Pete Doctor on core human emotions and experiences and the characters that live in our heads. Madeline Gannon, who's this incredible coder and programmer who basically does machine choreography, which I call dancing with robots. And then we brought Krista Tippett in recently, who had an incredible conversation with us about generous listening. The second thing we do is we widen the aperture of what research means. Research isn't just the lab, it's not just testing. Actually, like all of this is research. We're always learning, how could it possibly be something so limited? So I actually really go to film for myself as a huge source of inspiration, because when I look at E.T., this is one of the best machine learning sequences ever thought of. It's basically where E.T. and Elliot are coming to know each other, even though they're from totally different worlds. And so in this scene, basically, Elliot is like, telling E.T. what's up in his life. So he's like, this is Greedo, and this is Lando, these are my Star Wars characters, this is my goldfish, this, he's kind of teaching him everything about his little world when he's played hooky from school this day. And what's beautiful is that what you see is actually it's the beginning of empathy. Spielberg designed this into this scene, where you start to see the connection that plays out over the entire film and breaks all of our hearts. But where in this moment, he's basically saying, I feel hungry, do you feel hungry? And it's the beginning of this connection. So things like that are teachers for us too. We make different prototypes like books. This was actually a book that we made with Jeff McFetridge, which was kind of a meditation on how we want the future of AI to feel. If we start out there and what it feels like, how do we come back to where we are now and take the right steps? And really that inquiry is about focusing on the feeling of the problem that you're trying to solve, not just the problem itself. I love kind of these images just for like the feeling you get. And this one especially because, I love the image on the left because it's basically, this is where machines can snuggle in to support what extends and expands our humanity. Because we all know that life is not just from A to B to C to D. Everything else that ever matters is in between. So to be clear, this is certainly not a soft skills or just soft skills kind of stuff or on the side. I mean, I run a research lab in AI at Google, after all. I think the hardest part of this work is actually what gets referred to as soft skills, and Brene Brown put this really well. She was like, she came to Google and said, soft skills are really hard. So I think if we want the products that we're making and the things that we all live with to be more emotionally resonant and connected, we have to be more emotionally resonant and connected when we're building them. We like to be like, I'm perfect, I'm high performing, I got this, I meditated an hour before I worked out while emailing, I'm crushing it, and I'm full of gratitude at the same time. First of all, it's exhausting. But second of all, it's like not what's gonna get us there. Like what's gonna get us there is being honest about the messy. Like as honest about our inner lives as people are with me when they tenderly share theirs. Having hard conversations about our stuff, what we build, our blind spots, our impact, and how all of these things actually merge. So the truth is we need design feeling in way more than just technology, but it's a good start. So to wrap up, I'm going to share our latest project with you, and this is the first time I've talked about it publicly, and so it was kind of a treat to think about you guys being the first sort of step in this. But it's inspired by the Golden Record, and the story behind it actually came to me from NASA's artist in residence, a man named Dario Robledo, who shared it a few years ago. And so how many of you guys have heard of the Golden Record? Right on. So for those of you that don't know, it basically was something that went out with the Voyager interstellar missions in 1977. And Carl Sagan, obviously not just an astrophysicist, but a great myth maker, was the scientific director of it. And the goal of basically Voyager was to go shoot Jupiter and Saturn and then keep on cruising into the universe. And he was like, if we're going that far, why not send a time capsule with the essence of humanity? And so what most people don't know is that that was actually the summer that he also met his wife, Andrian. She was the creative director on the project. She said, this was a chance to tell something of what life on Earth was like to beings of perhaps 1,000 million years from now. If that didn't raise goosebumps, then you'd surely be made out of wood. And what they ended up creating was something called Murmurs or Songs of Earth, and it had 15, greetings in 59 languages, and a mother's first words to her child, and a man eating spaghetti. It was like, this is humanity. And there was one day when basically they needed to pick music for it, and they couldn't just be like, okay, we're gonna put the Beatles' White Album on it and call it a day, because it's for all of humanity. So she called Carl and said, I've got this 2,500-year-old song called Flowing River from China. It's beautiful, you have to listen to it. The beginning of that phone call, she's just sharing a song. By the end of that phone call, they were engaged. No one knows what happened in that call except for them. But what's beautiful is that one of the other ideas of the golden record was let's record the electrical impulses of the human brain and heart, like what it's like to be in this monkey suit, so the aliens will know. And what happened was when Anne actually went to record those biorhythms, the time she was in the hospital, she meditated on her love for Carl and how magical that summer was. So what she did is the golden record that is now far out into space, and I believe like very recently it just left like the known bounds they were planning for it. At the heart of the scientific mission, it's not just the human signal that's there. It's the signal of a human woman in love. So her sneaking in the signal of love to that great scientific mission, is basically, she's my shero. So the Empathies Lab's job is no different, I think, which is to build the love into all the future technologies that we make, to put that into the heart of them, so to build the love into AI. Because the most human things are the hardest things for machines. And so, literally knowing up and down and hurt and joy and fear and shame and dreams and mistakes and beauty and stories and wonder and flow, and most importantly, growth and learning and teaching and being together. Because there's so many possible futures, but we can't forget the heart. So my whole thing is let's load the dice. Let's load the dice towards our hearts. I like to kind of pretend in my own mind that I'm like a Montessori art teacher art and mindfulness teacher for machines, because of course they're gonna learn math and science so that they can do their jobs well with us. But I like to look after all the human stuff, like kindness and finger painting. So anyway, I want to share our latest project with you now, and it's actually called Learning Machines. Because AIs are a new technology that learn over time. And I like to think of them, we like to think of them as kind of curious learning machines. They start by understanding small pieces of our world, like math and science, but life on Earth is so alive with so many other experiences, like daydreaming and compassion, generosity, play, joy, and interconnection. So I think it's really important, and we all believe it's really important at the lab, to help AIs learn these important lessons. Let's teach them well, like we teach our children well. Let's teach them about the heart and soul and wisdom that we carry with us as humans, so that we can have that as we interact with them. And this time, because AI is about all of us and it needs all of our voices, this is not a conversation that's just for computer scientists and engineers or people that happen to work at tech companies. This is genuinely about all of us, and it takes all of us. My question to all of you and to everyone else is, what kind of precious value would you want to share? What lesson do you have to teach that should be coded into our future with technology? Because I'm listening, and we're all listening. And I think this next piece, it's like with a heart-exploding amount of gratitude that I am able to share that our very first official teacher is Ram Dass, because we're working in partnership with the Love, Serve, Remember Foundation, who's here. And I'm just so excited about that, because Ram Dass's lesson to share is that of generosity. And so actually in this clip, he voices so well the entire intention of the lab many moons ago.
I think that the spiritual trip at this moment is not necessarily a cave in the Himalayas, but it's in relation to the technology that's existing. It's in relation to where we're at. It's in relation to issues like pollution and political interests and activism and stuff like that. I think that's all part of one package now. The game is to be where you are, be it honestly and as consciously as you know how.
So all of this is why the lab exists, and you're why the lab exists, and we're all in this together, so thank you.